Homesteaders, Gardeners, and Cooks. My name is Jennifer. Welcome to Miles Away Farm, or welcome back. Today in the kitchen, we are making something called border beans. And this is a recipe from Hank Shaw. And I found this because I grew tepary beans last year in 2024. And tepary are a different species of bean from the typical dried bean that we usually grow. And they are native to southwestern part of the United States, so think New Mexico, Arizona. And I lived down in Arizona for a few years about 20-some years ago. And I always wanted to grow them when I was down there. The native seed search folks that are out of Tucson who do work to conserve native species of seeds had them in their catalog, and I had seen them. They're very drought tolerant, and I had wanted to grow them and just never got around to it for whatever reason. And so I finally got around to ordering some through, I think, either Adaptive Seeds or Experimental Farm. I can't remember which. I'll put it on the screen. And grew them out last year. And I was worried when I ate them that I wasn't going to like the flavor, because I've grown cowpeas before, which are basically the type of pea that is black-eyed peas. There's a bunch of different common names for them. And I don't really love the flavor of black-eyed peas. They're a little bit too earthy for me. And so while they were super fun to grow, not my favorite thing to eat, which I kind of already knew when I grew them, and I was hoping that growing some heirloom varieties would change that, but not really. So I was looking for a recipe to use these in, to try them out, to make sure that I really liked them before I grew more. And of course I Googled that, and Hank Shaw came up because the algorithm knows that I love Hank Shaw and that I use a lot of his recipes. And he had this recipe for border beans, and he grew tepary beans. He had a whole post on it and how he grew them in his backyard in California. And he was using these beans in this border bean recipe. You can use any beans you like in this recipe. It does not by any means need to be tepary beans. I just thought it was a fun way to try them. And man, this is one of the best bean recipes I have ever made. It is basically beans that eat like a meal. So it's beans, but it's also got some bacon. It's got some chorizo. It's got some tomatoes. It's got some poblanos. It's got some onions. It's essentially kind of like a chili, like a bean heavy chili. And oh, chef's kiss. We have really been enjoying it. It is a delicious recipe, and I will definitely be making it again with many other kinds of beans that I grow. So highly recommended, but it was really fun to give these a try and see whether or not we really like them. And we do. They're lovely. They do have a bit of an earthy flavor, but not disagreeable at all, and super fun to grow. And there's a bunch of different kinds. And so I might be growing some more of these in my garden in the next couple of years. So border beans from Hank Shaw, using tepary beans that I grew last year. Let's get started. So I ended up cooking my beans in some pork stock from another recipe that you'll see shortly. And so these were cooked in pork stock. Normally you could just cook them in water with a little bit of salt. And then I need some bacon, and you can cook this whole and then chop it up once it's cooked. For whatever reason, I decided to chop it before I fried it in the pan, and so took it out as bits. Choose your own adventure. I'm going to fry that up on medium heat in my cast iron skillet. And this is a big 12-inch cast iron skillet. And this bacon is pretty lean. This is from a pig that we bought in 2023, and it was a fairly lean pig, so not a ton of fat here. And then I'm going to need a small onion, nicely diced. It's been a while since I've showed you guys actually dicing an onion. I know that can get really tedious if it happens in practically every video, but I thought I'd leave it in this one. And so remember, when you're slicing onion, you want to leave that root end attached, because it helps everything stay intact, so that you can easily dice it without your onions sliding out from under you and ending up a huge mess. I went with a pretty small dice on this because it was going to be in the beans, and I wanted it to almost dissolve into the recipe rather than to be big chunks of onion. And you can see my onions are just starting to sprout. We're getting into late January, and so the onions I've had stored since last year are starting to sprout. These are frozen roasted poblano peppers, and so I love poblanos. It's become one of my very favorite chilies, and I grow them every year. And then at the end of the season, when we're going to have a frost, I pick whatever is left and throw them on the grill and roast them, and then just throw them in a bag. And so I hadn't cleaned these or taken the tops off, because sometimes all you can do is get them into the freezer and that's enough. So a little bit of cleanup going here. It called for one poblano chili. These were really small because it was end of season chilies. And so I ended up with 3 or 4 in here to be the equivalent of about one big store-bought poblano chili. You can throw these in your toaster oven on broil and roast them that way if you don't have a stash on hand. Some garlic, of course, and then into our pan with the bacon grease go our onions. And then this is homemade chorizo. This is Mexican chorizo. There are a bunch of different kinds. This is a half a pound, and I have a video on how I make this as well. And so if you're interested in that, I'll leave a link for that below. It is absolutely delicious, and we love having this ready to go in the freezer. So that half a pound of chorizo, and I'm just getting that broken up and frying in the pan in that bacon grease with the onions. I did want to show you that I had removed the bacon. It wasn't still in there. And then a couple of cloves of garlic. And I love how chefs like to debate the usefulness of a garlic press and whether or not it's a unitasker. You will pry my garlic press out of my cold dead hands. I am a big fan of garlic press in terms of not having to hand dice garlic. And this is a great example, you guys, of a recipe that utilizes things that are in your pantry. I've been thinking a lot as we go into this 2025 season. My garden is scaling back, and of course, there's all kinds of political upheaval happening right now with tariffs and who knows what else. And having a well-stocked pantry is not something you do overnight. It's something that takes time. And so I grew these beans. The tomatoes were canned from last year's garden, or probably the 2023 garden, because I usually have a couple of years on the shelf. The chorizo I made myself from a half a pig that we buy every year. The poblanos were in the garden and in the freezer. And so this is a pantry staple meal, but it's only a pantry staple meal because my current self is thanking my previous self for all of the work that I put into it. And so getting a well-stocked pantry is something that takes time and effort and is well worth it. And if you're building your pantry from grocery store staples on a budget, it might take some time to fill that pantry while taking advantage of sales. So the beans have been simmering here for about 20 minutes, and of course they're already fully cooked, so we're just melding all of the flavors. And then I'm throwing that crispy bacon in at the end for that extra flavor boost. And then this is traditionally served with a little bit of cotija or other shredded cheese, maybe some avocado, a little bit of hot sauce. But oh my gosh, this is so good. And if you want to make a meal out of it, throw it on a tostada. But border beans, give this recipe a try, Tribe. Highly, highly recommend it. Thanks for watching, Tribe. If you like this kind of content, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, leave me a comment, and share. I have new content coming out every week.